FiveTwoBaker, and I'm back to share with you a tutorial for how to make a sugar dahlia. This dahlia in particular has little cone-shaped leaves which are super cute, and we're working together to make the center of the dahlia, all the petals, the calyx, the leaves, color it all, and assemble it all together. And we're going to jam that all into 30 minutes. Just in case, I do use a homemade flour paste. If you're using store-bought gum paste, just make sure to work in sections, cover your petals if you're not using them, and go on from there. Because you'll see in my video, I just cut it all out at once. I work with it out in the open, and that's okay for me because I make sure that my paste is very wet, so I have that time to do all that. But store-bought gum paste is usually not that forgiving on time, so make sure to wrap it all up and uncover as you go. But let's get to it. Okay, so you're going to need a work surface, and I use this mat that I got from Joann's. You'll need a rolling pin. You'll need a carrier wire, something a bit more sturdy, maybe a 20 gauge would do well. You'll need some needle nose pliers to roll the wire. I'm using wire cutters. You'll need gum paste. You'll need your flour paste, which can also be gum paste. You'll need your cutters. I'm only using the first 4 cutters. You'll need veiners if you will be veining your petals. You'll need something to cut with and something thin. I use a scalpel. You'll need a fat dusting brush or something to spread around the cornstarch. A few different types of brushes, fluffy and stiff. You'll need your color dust. I'm using a dark red to match my paste and a brown. You'll need edible glue. Mine is just water with CMC. You'll need a toothpick or something thin like it. And of course, I forgot to show you, you'll need the cornstarch for dusting and a rolling ball tool. These, a lot of these things are optional. This mat here just makes it easy for me. You don't need it, you can do without it. You'll need something to vein your leaves, your green paste for the leaves, your daisy cutter for the calyx, and 2 thin wires for the leaves, or as many leaves as you're going to make, that many wires. Mine are about a 26 gauge. You'll need crisco, your green color dust. I have a dark green and a light green, and if you'd like to paint it on, you can use something like a vodka so that it evaporates quickly, but you can do without it also. And then you'll need your green floral tape. We're going to start off with a sturdy wire, and then grab your needle nose pliers. I'm using wire cutters, so I'm trying to be a little careful, and just twist that wire around at the end in a circle, and then bend it over so that the circle is centered over the wire. Once you have that done, go ahead and mush up your gum paste till it's nice and soft. Mine is a store-bought gum paste. I think it's Wilton, and I use store-bought because it's convenient. You just put it right over the circle you just made on your wire and smooth it out. I usually start off with extra and then pinch off what I don't need and then just smooth it around. You want it to be nice and smooth and not have cracks all around so that it doesn't crack later. Once you're all done with this, set it aside and let it dry for a few days so it can be nice and firm. Next, condition your flower paste. So mush it up till it's nice and stretchy and then roll it out till it's nice and thin. Mine is pretty sticky, so I'm using a bit more cornstarch than usual. Now you grab your cutters and start with the smallest one. And you cut out as many as you want. You just press firmly down and then pull right up. I cut 20 of these small ones, but I've cut as many as like 35 or so. It just depends on the size of your dahlia. Then you go one size up in your cutters. Cut again, a bit fewer than the first size, so I'm cutting 15. But again, it's your call. Go another size up in cutters. I cut another 15. And then I must have been exhausted here that I don't even show you the fourth size. You just go up another size and I cut about 7. After that, go ahead and peel off all the extra and start flipping your petals. I dust the top first with a bit of cornstarch so they don't stick when I flip them, and then I use a scalpel to slide under the petal and flip it over. You can use an X-Acto knife, you can use anything else that you have thin. I'm just very attached to my scalpel. I always have it and it just makes everything so easy. But be super careful because they're super sharp. I dust the petals again so they don't stick to my molds, or to my veiners I should say, and then I pull out the smallest veiner I have and I start with the smallest petals. You just pick them up, you put them in the veiner. I usually try to line it up with the top of the veiner, give it a smush, and then shake it right out. Use your sharp tool to peel it off if you need, and keep going. Do this with all of your petals, and I have different size veiners for the different size petals. You could also not use veiners at all and it would look very pretty, but I really like the veiners. I think it looks more realistic, so I use them every time. Now it's time to start rolling the petals. Starting with the smallest ones, you go ahead and grab your edible glue and you put glue on the very base of the petal, the fat part, and you just roll it up like a little taco. And if there's no opening in this little taco or this little ice cream cone that you are forming, no biggie. For the smallest petals, you don't really need it. You just want the basic shape. Once you move up to the larger petals, the next size up, you want to go ahead and glue the underside of the right and fold it under the left side, if that makes sense. Just go ahead and make a little ice cream cone with the bottom part of your petal. Or you could glue the top of the left side and still fold in the same way. Whichever way you fold, as long as you get an ice cream cone shape, that's all that matters. keep doing this for nearly all the petals. Not all of the small ones though, because you'll need some flat small ones. Just leave a few to the side, maybe like 9 or so. The larger the petal, the easier it is to form this little cone shape. So try not to get too frustrated with the small ones because it does get easier. Once you're all done, go ahead and separate all of the petals by size and isolate your flat ones. Bring out that little center ball that you made in the beginning and put some edible glue all around it so you can start gluing on these petals. I start with the flat ones, and it doesn't matter how you get them on here. You just want it to cover all of the white so you don't see it. I space them out so that they can be overlapping, but you can overlap them side by side. That works too. This is just how I do it. And we'll speed this up. Once you're all covered, go ahead and grab the smallest of your cone petals and you start gluing the cone part. For some of them, you might want it to be a little more closed so they look like the real baby petals at the very inside. Maybe they're just opening, so you go ahead and add a little bit of glue to the part that's not a cone and just fold it over. Another thing that you can do is you can make the tips a little pointier by gluing the tip and then giving it a squeeze. Because sometimes petals do that, where they're unfolding, and so the very baby ones are a little pointier than the very far outside ones. I should have done that at the very beginning, but I forgot, so I'm trying to do it now. But because I waited so long to do it, that little pointy tip did not stick with all of the petals. No biggie though. You go ahead and you glue all of these all around, trying to not stack one on top of the other, but instead overlap them. That's what you want to do with all the petals, is just overlap them. Just a few more small ones. And now you go on to the second size petals. Go ahead and glue that cone on the outside and hold the very base of it and bring out your toothpick. You're going to go into that little cone, the empty space that you worked so hard to create, and you're going to press down on that only. And the reason you want to do that is so that you don't just have a flat petal. If you had a flat petal, then there was no point in making that cone. You want this to look filled in. You want there to be that space. So that's why you only press on the base, and then you grab your toothpick and you press the inside down gently. Really make sure that that base is secured, because that's going to hold the entire petal in place while the rest of the glue dries. And again, as with all the petals, you want to overlap them you don't want to stack one on top of the other. That wouldn't look very natural. I'm all about you doing whatever you want to do with the petals, with your flowers, make them look however you want. But if you stack them on top, that's not going to look very natural. It's going to look weird. So go ahead and do this all the way around for the entire flower. We'll speed up this process because it's the same one over and over. And really, once you get the hang of the first few petals, it's not that hard. You just put everything down with that toothpick. It's such a handy little tool. Here go the last few petals of mine. Go ahead and use that toothpick to really roll the base of each petal down. Make sure it's secure. I think this is actually how slowly I work. This is why it takes so long. And I mostly work upside down with the flower, but I will, as you can see, prop it up to see where the spaces are empty and where I should put my petals. It's just easier to work with it upside down for me. And once I have all my petals on there, I add a little more glue to the base, just a tiny bit. Once again, make sure that all the petals are secure. And that's it. You're all done with your flower. You'll just go ahead and hang it upside down somewhere to dry for the night. Once it's all dry, go ahead and take a fluffy brush and dust off all that excess cornstarch that you might have. And grab a color dust that is similar to the flower. So for me, my flower is red and I wanted it to be a little darker, so I took a really bold red color dust that I have and I just dust it all around. At first, I'm just getting every single nook and cranny, every petal, trying to give it a more velvety texture, and just trying to overall darken the entire flower. I'll go ahead and do more color dust on the insides of the petals and on the center of the flower, just because those are naturally a little bit darker. And then I go ahead and shake off any excess and dust until I'm happy. Now another color that I like to use a lot are browns when I'm doing flowers, and that's for the shading, the contouring, any edge that I want to give the flower. So what I do is I use my same brush, my same fluffy brush, and I just dab the color dust on the side of the brush. So then I can lightly tap the edges of the outside petals to have it stand out a bit more, and the bigger petals, maybe give them a little bit more age. I also go ahead and do the inside of the petals, again because it's a little bit darker. I'll put a little bit on the center of the flower, but I don't want to go over every single petal. I don't want a brown flower. I just want to lightly dust it and give it a little bit more shade and contour. And also when I'm doing the color dust, I grab very little at a time. I can always go back and put more color on it if I'm not satisfied with how dark it is, but it's really hard to take the color off without streaking the petals. So I just tap the color on until I'm happy. And I'll usually go back and color these a few times. Even once I'm done assembling everything, if I look at it and there's something that just doesn't look right, I'll go back and add a little bit more color. This is definitely not one of those things for me where it's just said and done. Takes a few tries. Next, we're going to work on the calyx and the leaves. So I go ahead and I grab my green flower paste, make sure it's conditioned, and then I roll it out thin, just on a flat surface for the calyx. Again, my paste is pretty sticky right now because it's relatively fresh, so I'm using quite a bit of cornstarch so that it doesn't stick everywhere, and it's just a little easier to work with. I go super thin for the calyx, and for the Dahlia calyx, I'm using a daisy cutter. It's really small, it just has a few petals. And I'll leave that in the cutter. I don't need it just yet. For the leaves, I don't have a cutter. So what I do is I roll it on this mat that has little grooves for where the vein goes. And I use my veiner for a regular rose leaf. And I just cut out the basic shape, and then I go ahead in with my scalpel and I cut a smaller leaf in the shape that I want. I'll go ahead and for this flower I'll make 2 leaves. So I make each leaf just a little bit different, but it's the same concept. I just go ahead and cut it out by hand because I don't have the cutter that goes to this veiner, and it's really not that hard to cut out the leaf anyway. So once I have them cut out, I leave them on that mat thing, and then I go ahead and put the wire in. Because my flower paste is so wet, I don't use any glue. I just go ahead and put it in there, and then I put it onto my foaming mat. I use a medium-sized rolling ball tool, and I just thin everything out. I thin the edges out of the calyx, and then I go in down the center, and with a straight edge tool I just do little lines on there to make it a little bit more realistic. With a larger ball rolling tool, I thin out the edges of my leaves, and then I go ahead and pop them in my veiner. Then while they're in the veiner, I carefully with my scalpel go ahead and cut out the little sharp edges of the leaves. And I don't press too hard because I don't want to cut through my veiner. And I do that for both of them. Seems tedious, but it's worth it to me. I like all the little sharp edges on the flowers, or on the leaves. Now for the calyx, just go ahead and glue it and pop it right onto your flower. I bend the edges of the calyx to make it look a little more real, and I finish off my leaves by setting them to dry. Now to color them, you could just go ahead and use some color dust and pop that on there, but this time I went ahead and I used a little bit of vodka so that it dries faster, and the color dust to paint my leaves. I was hoping that that would give them a little bit more shine, but it actually made them chalky. So no worries, it still worked out in the end. But I'm saying that because you can use the vodka and you can paint them on to get more color coverage, or you could just go ahead and do some color dust. But going ahead with this vodka, I used a brush that had not an even surface, a jagged surface, so that I could get some streaks onto my leaves, because I didn't want just a flat color. I wanted a few veins to pop. I wanted it to look like it had multiple colors. And I go ahead and use my dark green color dust to go down the center and some of the veins so that they pop a little harder. And then I use the lighter one on the rest. And I do this for both leaves. Once I'm done painting them, I put them to the side and make sure they're completely dry before I move on to the next step. I go ahead and I add some color to the calyx as well. I didn't want it to be that one single green. And I want the entire flower to match, look like it came from the same plant. Now once it's completely dry, I wanted it to have a little bit more shine because some leaves have a gloss to it. So what I did was I took a fluffy brush, and this one's a little stiffer, but it's still fluffy on the end, if that makes sense. And I took some Crisco and I just very lightly put it all over the leaf so that it had that gloss effect. There's probably a ton of other ways to achieve this, but this is the way that I thought to do it with, so that's just how I did it. And it does rub off color if you touch it right away, but once it dries, it stays shiny and the color does not come off, so that's nice. Now to assemble the flower, I go ahead and take my floral tape and I start from the top of the flower, and you probably want to make sure your leaves are set up first. And I roll the floral tape all the way down my flower to the point where I want my leaves to go, and then I attach the leaves and I just keep going down. Now once it's assembled, I'm looking at it and I think it needs a little bit more color, so I grab some brown and again I darken the center. I put a little more color on the edges so that they stand out a bit more, and on the tips I put a bit more brown just so it looks a little bit more aged. And then I go ahead and I also color in my stem a bit so that again the entire flower matches and it doesn't look like segmented pieces. And that's about it. Anything else is just whatever you want to touch up at the last minute. Alright guys, and that's it. It's a lot of information, a lot of petals, a lot of cutting and all that, but it's a beautiful flower. So if you have any questions, if there's anything that I didn't explain or you're not sure about something, it was a lot of information and I tried to condense it as much as I could. So if I missed anything, let me know in the comments below and I'll get back to you. If you decide to make a dahlia, let me know that too. Tag me on Instagram and Facebook so that I can look at your beautiful work and share it with everyone. And as always, if you like the video, thumbs up, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I look forward to sharing the next tutorial with you guys. See ya!